We're gonna need a bigger boat. Jaws wasn't just the movie that made people afraid to go in the water. It was the production that almost made Steven Spielberg quit filmmaking forever. Behind the scenes of this legendary thriller lay a nightmare of broken mechanical sharks, drunken feuds between Oscar-winning actors, and a 25-year-old director on the verge of a complete nervous breakdown. The shoot that was supposed to take 55 days stretched into 159 days of pure chaos. Budgets exploded, careers nearly ended, and what should have been a simple monster movie became the birth of the modern blockbuster through sheer accident and desperation. Today, I'm revealing 20 weird facts about Jaws that will change how you see this classic forever. Plus, there's a bonus fact about the film's most famous scene that even hardcore fans have never heard. Let's dive deep. The mechanical shark had a name. Steven Spielberg didn't just battle a fictional great white during production. He waged war against three 25-foot mechanical sharks collectively nicknamed Bruce, after his lawyer, Bruce Raymer. These mechanical nightmares cost $150,000 each and worked about as reliably as a chocolate teapot. Salt water corroded their internal mechanisms daily. The pneumatic systems failed constantly, leaving the crew staring at a lifeless rubber fish floating sideways in the Atlantic. Bruce 1 exploded during its first test run, spewing hydraulic fluid across Martha's Vineyard like mechanical blood. Bruce 2 developed what the crew called the shakes, uncontrollable spasms that made the shark look more like it was having a seizure than hunting prey. Bruce 3 simply sank to the ocean floor on day 12 and had to be retrieved by professional divers. What audiences didn't know was that the shark's apparent intelligence in staying hidden wasn't an artistic choice. It was pure mechanical failure forcing Spielberg to suggest the monster rather than show it. Robert Shaw was cast 9 days before filming. The role of Quint, the grizzled shark hunter, almost went to Lee Marvin. When Marvin demanded too much money, Universal scrambled. Robert Shaw, cast as Quint just 9 days before principal photography was due to start, had a tougher time making the movie than his fellow leading actors. Shaw got the call while drinking in a London pub, celebrating the end of another film. He was so intoxicated during the phone negotiations that he couldn't remember agreeing to the role until his agent called the next morning to congratulate him. Shaw arrived on Martha's Vineyard with no preparation, no research, and a serious drinking problem that would define his entire Jaws experience. He spent his first week on set reading Melville's Moby Dick frantically, trying to understand the character he'd already committed to playing. The panic in Quint's eyes during his Indianapolis speech? That wasn't just acting. It was Shaw realizing he was in over his head in a production that was spiraling toward disaster. Richard Dreyfuss thought the movie would end his career. Fresh off his breakthrough in American Graffiti, Richard Dreyfuss signed on to Jaws believing it would be a sophisticated character drama about man versus nature. When he arrived on set and saw the mechanical shark, he immediately called his agent in panic. "I've just ruined my career," he reportedly told friends. "I'm going to be known as the guy in the stupid shark movie." Dreyfuss spent the first month of filming convinced he was participating in a B-movie disaster that would destroy his artistic credibility. He watched Spielberg struggle with the malfunctioning sharks and the runaway budget, certain that Universal would shut down production and release the film straight to drive-ins. The irony? His performance as marine biologist Matt Hooper became one of his most beloved roles, proving that sometimes the projects that feel like career suicide can become career-defining masterpieces. The famous dolly zoom was actually an accident. The vertigo shot that occurs when Chief Brody spots the shark attack on the beach, where the background stretches while Brody stays in focus, wasn't planned. Cinematographer Bill Butler was experimenting with a technique he'd seen in Hitchcock's Vertigo, but the camera operator misunderstood the instructions during the first take. Instead of stopping the effect, Butler realized the mistake created an even more disorienting sensation of reality shifting beneath Brody's feet. Spielberg was so focused on managing the chaos of filming on an active beach with hundreds of extras that he didn't even notice the shot until dailies that evening. The moment he saw it, he knew they'd accidentally captured something revolutionary. What was meant to be a simple reaction shot became one of cinema's most copied visual techniques, born from confusion and happy accidents on a troubled set. Martha's Vineyard locals became unwitting casualties. The production invaded Martha's Vineyard like a Hollywood army, but the locals weren't prepared for the chaos that followed. Shot mostly on location at Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts from May to October 1974, Jaws was the first major motion picture to be shot on the ocean. Restaurants ran out of food feeding the massive crew. Hotels were booked solid, forcing production assistants to sleep in cars and beach houses. Local fishermen found their usual routes blocked by film equipment. The Coast Guard received dozens of calls from confused boaters who thought the mechanical sharks were real emergency situations. 3 separate rescue boats were dispatched to save crew members from what appeared to be genuine shark attacks. One elderly resident reportedly had a heart attack after stumbling upon Bruce II being tested in shallow water at dawn. The island that was supposed to provide a peaceful backdrop became a war zone of mechanical failures and Hollywood excess. Roy Scheider never wanted to be in the water. Chief Brody's famous fear of water wasn't just character development, it reflected Roy Scheider's genuine terror of the ocean. Scheider, a native New Yorker, had limited swimming ability and was genuinely frightened by the prospect of filming on boats in rough Atlantic waters. His white-knuckled grip on the orca's railings during storm scenes? Completely authentic fear. Spielberg used Scheider's natural anxiety to enhance Brody's character, but the actor's discomfort became a production problem when scenes required him to enter the water. A professional stunt double-handled most of Scheider's water work, but close-ups demanded the real actor. Scheider's genuine panic during the barrel hunting sequence where the shark attacks the boat created some of the film's most visceral moments, proving that sometimes the best performances come from real terror rather than acting technique. The blood was actually Hershey's chocolate syrup. Creating convincing blood that would show up on film while floating in ocean water presented unique challenges. Traditional theatrical blood washed away instantly or looked fluorescent orange underwater. The special effects team experimented with dozens of formulas before settling on Hershey's chocolate syrup, mixed with food coloring and cornstarch. The chocolate syrup had the right consistency to cling to actors and props while maintaining visibility underwater. It also created the cloudy dark effect that made shark attacks look genuinely horrific. However, the sweet mixture attracted real marine life, including schools of fish and occasionally aggressive seabirds that would dive bomb actors during death scenes. Chrissy Watkins actress Susan Backliney spent an entire afternoon covered in chocolate syrup while being mechanically thrashed by the opening attack apparatus, creating cinema's most famous shark victim through a combination of candy and controlled violence. Steven Spielberg was almost fired 3 times. Universal executives watched their $3.5 million shark movie balloon toward $9 million with growing horror. Studio head Sid Sheinberg received daily reports of mechanical failures, weather delays, and budget overruns from a director who was barely 26 years old and had only 1 theatrical feature under his belt. 3 separate meetings were held to discuss replacing Spielberg with a more experienced director. The decision to keep Spielberg came down to logistics rather than faith in his vision. Firing him would have meant scrapping months of footage and starting over, potentially doubling the already astronomical budget. So Universal executives gritted their teeth and watched their inexperienced director learn filmmaking in real time on the most expensive production in the studio's history. Spielberg later admitted he cried himself to sleep multiple nights, convinced his career was over before it had truly begun. The Indianapolis speech almost didn't happen. Robert Shaw's haunting monologue about the USS Indianapolis disaster, considered one of cinema's greatest speeches, was nearly cut from the film multiple times. The first version Shaw wrote was rambling and incoherent, reflecting his research into actual survivor accounts. Universal executives thought it slowed the film's pace and added unnecessary historical weight to what should be a simple thriller. Robert Shaw loved a drink and decided he'd try and do the scene when he was drunk. The first attempt was unusable. Shaw was so intoxicated he couldn't remember his lines or maintain the emotional core of the speech. That day, at 4 in the morning, Robert called Steven Spielberg and he said, "How badly did I humiliate myself?" And Steven said, "Not fatally." And the next day, he did the scene in 1 take. That sober, single-take performance became the film's emotional centerpiece, transforming Quint from a cartoon into a tragic figure haunted by real wartime trauma. The crew developed Jaws syndrome, By the third month of production, the cast and crew had developed what they called Jaws syndrome, a collective paranoia about entering any body of water. Even swimming pools became sources of anxiety. Crew members reported nightmares about shark attacks weeks after filming wrapped. Some refused to take baths, opting for showers exclusively. The psychological impact wasn't just superstition. The combination of constant shark imagery, mechanical failures that looked like real attacks, and the stress of the troubled production created genuine trauma responses in many participants. Richard Dreyfuss admitted he didn't swim in the ocean for 2 years after filming concluded. Even Martha's Vineyard locals found themselves scanning the water nervously during their daily routines, affected by months of witnessing simulated shark carnage. Hey, if you're enjoying these behind-the-scenes secrets, go ahead and like and subscribe, because we're just getting started with the really wild stuff. The next 10 facts get even weirder. The shark attacks were choreographed like dance numbers. Without a functioning mechanical shark for most of the production, Spielberg had to choreograph attack scenes like elaborate dance numbers. Each shark encounter required precise timing between multiple boats, underwater cameras, actors, and floating barrels representing the unseen predator. The crew developed an elaborate system of hand signals and radio codes to coordinate movements. The famous scene where the shark rams the orca required 17 separate takes and involved 3 boats: the hero orca, a camera boat, and a safety vessel. Each attack was a carefully timed collision between the camera boat and the orca, with actors reacting to impacts they couldn't predict. Roy Scheider suffered genuine bruises and cuts from being thrown around the boat during these choreographed crashes, adding authentic pain to his performance as the terrified police chief. Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw's feud nearly destroyed scenes. Robert Shaw and Richard Dreyfuss had a tumultuous relationship on and off screen, with Shaw frequently tormenting Dreyfuss. What started as personality conflicts escalated into psychological warfare that threatened to derail the production. Shaw, a heavy drinker with old-school theatrical training, viewed Dreyfuss as a privileged, method-acting brat who hadn't earned his success. There were stories about Shaw insulting Dreyfuss's weight and trying to humiliate him by challenging him to various physical activities. Shaw would arrive on set drunk and deliberately forget his lines, forcing multiple takes that exhausted Dreyfuss. It was also noted that Dreyfuss was annoyed with Shaw's excessive drinking while filming. The tension reached its peak when Dreyfuss threw Shaw's glass of alcohol overboard during a particularly heated argument, nearly causing Shaw to attack him physically. Ironically, their real-life animosity created the perfect dynamic between Hooper and Quint, making their on-screen rivalry feel devastatingly authentic. The Orca was actually 3 different boats. The fishing vessel Orca, piloted by Quint, was actually 3 different boats depending on the scene's requirements. The Hero Orca was a fully functional fishing boat used for wide shots and sailing scenes. The Stunt Orca was reinforced for collision sequences and mechanical shark attacks. The sinking Orca was specifically built to break apart convincingly while protecting the actors inside. Managing 3 different boats created continuity nightmares. Props and set decorations had to be precisely matched across all 3 vessels. The sinking Orca was designed with hidden air pockets and safety harnesses, but the sequence was still genuinely dangerous. When the boat actually began sinking faster than planned during filming, Roy Scheider's terrified screams were completely authentic as he realized they might all drown in pursuit of a convincing death scene. John Williams almost didn't write the famous score. The iconic Dunna Dunna shark theme almost never existed. John Williams initially approached the score as a traditional orchestral thriller, writing sweeping nautical themes and complex harmonic progressions. When he first played his simple 2-note shark motif for Spielberg, the director initially laughed, thinking Williams was joking. "That's it?" Spielberg reportedly asked. Williams convinced him that simplicity would be more effective than complexity for building suspense. The composer drew inspiration from Dvořák's New World Symphony and Debussy's La Mer, but the killer shark needed something more primal. The final 2-note theme took Williams less than 10 minutes to compose, but required weeks of orchestration to create the different variations used throughout the film. What seemed like throwaway simplicity became one of cinema's most recognizable and terrifying musical phrases. Martha's Vineyard's economy changed forever. The Jaws production didn't just film on Martha's Vineyard, it fundamentally altered the island's economy and identity. Local businesses that served the film crew during the troubled shoot discovered that Hollywood productions brought serious money. Within 5 years, Martha's Vineyard had positioned itself as a premium filming location, attracting productions specifically because of its Jaws connection. The island's tourism industry exploded as fans made pilgrimages to see filming locations. Local boat operators began offering Jaws tours that are still running today, 50 years later. Real estate values in areas shown in the film increased dramatically as buyers wanted to own pieces of movie history. What was supposed to be a temporary Hollywood invasion became a permanent economic transformation, proving that even troubled productions can create lasting cultural impact. The shark actually worked once. After months of mechanical failures, Bruce finally functioned perfectly during one crucial sequence, the climactic battle where the shark attacks the orca. For approximately 45 minutes of filming, all the mechanical systems synchronized, the hydraulics responded correctly, and the shark moved with terrifying realism. The crew was so shocked by Bruce's sudden functionality that they scrambled to film every possible angle and movement while the mechanism lasted. Most of the close-up shark footage in the film's final act comes from this single session when everything miraculously worked. Then, as suddenly as it had come to life, Bruce shut down permanently, his mechanical brain apparently exhausted by the effort of being an actual movie monster. The crew later discovered that a brief temperature change had caused the hydraulic fluid to reach optimal consistency, a meteorological miracle that couldn't be replicated. Roy Scheider's bigger boat line was completely improvised. The most quoted line in Jaws history wasn't in Peter Benchley's novel or any draft of the screenplay. Roy Scheider spontaneously delivered, "We're gonna need a bigger boat," during filming, and Spielberg loved it so much he kept it in multiple scenes. The line became Scheider's running commentary on the entire troubled production. Whenever something went wrong, when the mechanical shark broke down, when the weather turned bad, when the budget exploded, Scheider would mutter, "We're gonna need a bigger boat." It became the crew's unofficial motto for dealing with problems that seemed impossibly large. The line worked so perfectly because it captured both Brody's growing terror and the production's mounting sense that they'd bitten off more than they could chew. What started as an actor's improvised frustration became one of cinema's most enduring quotations. The beach scenes nearly caused real panic. Filming the beach attack sequence required coordinating hundreds of extras who had no idea when or where the shark attack would occur. To create genuine panic reactions, Spielberg didn't tell most extras the timing of the attack. When the blood hit the water and actors began screaming, many extras genuinely thought they were witnessing a real emergency. Several extras jumped into the water to rescue the victim before being restrained by crew members. Others called for real ambulances and lifeguards. The chaos was so convincing that actual beachgoers not involved in filming fled the area in terror. Local police had to set up barriers to prevent concerned citizens from interfering with the production, not realizing they were watching a movie rather than a genuine tragedy. Peter Benchley hated what his novel became. Author Peter Benchley sold his novel's film rights before publication, assuming the movie would be a low-budget exploitation film that wouldn't affect the book's reputation. When he saw Spielberg's version, he was horrified by how the film transformed his ecological thriller into pure monster entertainment. Benchley spent the rest of his life trying to distance himself from Jaws' anti-shark message, becoming a marine conservationist who worked to protect the creatures his novel had demonized. He wrote books and articles explaining that sharks were not the mindless killers depicted in his fiction. The success of Jaws haunted Benchley as he watched public perception of sharks shift from natural respect to supernatural terror, proving that sometimes creators lose control of their own stories once Hollywood gets involved. The film almost had a completely different ending. Originally, Quint was supposed to survive the shark encounter, and the final battle was much less explosive. Early drafts had Hooper trapped in the shark cage throughout the climax, watching helplessly as Brody and Quint worked together to kill the beast with harpoons and rifles. The mechanical shark's failures forced Spielberg to rethink the ending completely. Since Bruce couldn't perform the complex choreography required for a prolonged battle, the solution became more dramatic and final: blow up the shark with compressed air tanks. This last-minute change created a more mythic conclusion than Benchley's novel ever envisioned, transforming a realistic creature feature into something approaching Greek tragedy, where the monster's death required genuine sacrifice and heroic action. Bonus fact: here's something that will change how you see Jaws forever. Steven Spielberg and screenwriter Carl Gottlieb deliberately modeled the great white shark's behavior on human serial killers rather than actual shark biology. They studied case files of multiple murderers, analyzing patterns of victim selection, geographic hunting ranges, and escalation behaviors. The shark in Jaws doesn't behave like any real great white. It's too intelligent, too vengeful, too specifically focused on Amity Island. That's because Spielberg wanted to create a non-human character with human psychological complexity. The shark's apparent ability to recognize individual people, its strategic thinking, and its seeming desire for revenge all come from criminal psychology profiles rather than marine biology textbooks. This explains why the film feels more like a slasher movie than a nature documentary, because the monster was designed using the behavioral patterns of human predators rather than ocean predators. 50 years later, Jaws remains the accidental masterpiece that almost never got made. What was supposed to be a simple monster movie became the template for the modern blockbuster through mechanical failure, creative desperation, and sheer blind luck. The troubled production that nearly ended careers instead launched Hollywood's biggest franchise era, proving that sometimes the most chaotic filmmaking experiences create the most enduring entertainment. If you found these behind-the-scenes secrets as jaw-dropping as I did, smash that like button and subscribe for more wild movie facts. Because in Hollywood, the real story is always stranger than anything you see on screen. After all, we're gonna need a bigger boat.